Thank you. Good morning, everyone. After the basic uh, fundamentals being explained by Dr. Chadda, it's my duty to talk about a little bit about the clinical relevance of hydroxychloroquine in type 2 diabetes, and I'm going to cover some of the data in the time allotted to me. We know that hydroxychloroquine was first utilized as a treatment for rheumatoid arthritis and lupus, subsequently for polymorphous light eruptions. It's only in 2014 when people recognized and was approved to be used as a treatment for diabetes mellitus. So it's been a long time since chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine has been in the market for use, but in 2014 it got adopted for use in diabetes. There are several mechanisms by which this particular drug may act. One of the most important pathways that has been recognized is that it has some implications in the insulin degradation. Normally, insulin binds to the cell membrane, gets internalized as an endocytic vehicle, it dissociates from the receptor, and then it is lysed by all the insulin degrading enzymes like proteases, glutathione, transhydrogenase, etc. inside the cell, and that is how the insulin action is stopped. What hydroxychloroquine does is that hydroxychloroquine changes the pH of the cell inside. It makes it more alkaline, and because of alkalinization, there is inactivation of the insulin degrading enzymes, and that is why insulin is released back from the endocytic vehicle and is therefore ready to act again. So this is one of the most important mechanisms that has been demonstrated to be active in people. There are, of course, certain other mechanisms. The first one of which is reduction in inflammation. It's not 100% clarified and there is no mechanistic explanation as to why it happens. But there are certain trials which say that if you reduce the inflammation, one of the markers being CRP, you get a change in the HbA1c. So this is an indirect evidence. The third mechanism is improvement of insulin sensitivity, and trials on hydroxychloroquine, when used over about 12 to 24 weeks, have clearly shown that there is an improvement in insulin sensitivity index, a reduction in insulin resistance, which typically tends to go back to original once hydroxychloroquine is stopped. And animal models have shown that there could be some degree of preservation of the islet cell mass and the beta cells by using chloroquine. Again, I would not say that these are completely proven mechanisms on long-term studies, but the insulin degrading enzyme pathways are clearly now recognized. We have some clinical evidence on hydroxychloroquine. The evidence is not as strong or as big as you now see for most of the trials which involve 10,000 or 20,000 patients, but there is definitely some evidence. There are some international studies. It's impossible for paucity of time to go through each study, but there are studies which have utilized basically people who have been taking a large combination of metformin and sulfonylureas, even with insulin, and hydroxychloroquine is added. And as you can see, even in the first slide, you will see that the HbA1c was reduced to somewhere up to 3.3. There are other studies as well, utilizing again maximum sulfonylureas with metformin and a more reasonable reduction of about 1% HbA1c. You can see here that there are others as well, people on insulin, glimepiride, metformin, and all of them, comparison with pioglitazone, you will see roughly about a 1.2 to 1.3% reduction in HbA1c. The first Indian phase 3 clinical trial was basically to look at metformin and glimepiride in the large dose possible, and hydroxychloroquine was randomized against pioglitazone therapy. And if you see here, both these agents, when added as a third therapy of choice, did reduce both fasting, it reduced postprandial, and it also reduced the HbA1c significantly. The main difference between the two was hydroxychloroquine people actually lost weight, pioglitazone induced weight gain was certainly seen. In another phase 4 study in 600 patients, we saw that if you took two groups of patients, one with a CRP level of less than 3 and more than 3. In both groups, you will see that there is HbA1c reduction. There is also a reduction in CRP. The A1C dropped down by roughly about 1% at the end of 52 weeks if the study was taken till that time. Both fasting and PP sugars came down. So, even at the end of 1 year, there was some meaningful reduction in HbA1c in people who even had high CRP, but the reduction was seen even when the CRP was not actually high. In another one, in 1000 patients with A1C more than 7.5 on a combination of two OHAs, you will see here that there is a significant drop in HbA1c levels over 24 weeks. There was also a drop in the fasting PP levels, and more importantly, there is also an improvement in total cholesterol, the non-HDL cholesterol and the LDL cholesterol by roughly these amounts. So, the conclusion from the study that we could get was that not only is it useful in diabetes as an additional drug, it is clearly certainly not altering the lipids in an adverse manner. So, it is not probably bad for the cardiovascular system. There have been a number of observational studies in type 2 diabetes, some with teneligliptin being replaced by hydroxychloroquine. And by and large, let me tell you, if you go through all the evidence, it's not possible to enumerate these trials at this point of time. But by and large, you will see that there has been a reduction in HbA1c starting from about 0.9 going up to about 1.3%. So, roughly in all these, when you add that as a second or a third line agent, even in patients who were on insulin, there has been a drop in the insulin requirement by about 30%. So, not only has the HbA1c improved, there has been some weight loss, there has been a reduction in the amount of insulin that we require for these particular patients. There are a number of observational studies in India that has now been carried out. And last year, we published a expert group consensus opinion based on all the data that is available up to now. So, the idea was to say that this particular molecule, based on evidence, could emerge as a valuable therapeutic option in the management of type 2 diabetes, uncontrolled on conventional oral therapies. So, at present, the role of hydroxychloroquine is being kept as a third line agent after two significantly useful drugs have been utilized. The ICMR also has approved the use of this drug or validated the use of this anti-rheumatoid drug hydroxychloroquine used as an anti-hyperglycemic agent in India, and so has the RSSDI. As far as the CV protection is concerned, I think in today's age and date we must know about what CV protection role hydroxychloroquine has. I would not say that the data is again as strong as say EMPA-REG or CANVAS or DAPA-HF, because this drug is not really a kind of blockbuster money spinner kind of drug as the new SGLT2s or the gliptins might be. So, there have been limited interest in trying to put this to test. But whatever has been done, we have some evidence, and this is a retrospective analysis of a cohort of rheumatoid arthritis patients being studied over almost 13 to 14 years. Risk of cardiovascular disease developing in hydroxychloroquine users versus no users. And we could see a clear 72% drop in the risk of new onset of CVD with the use of hydroxychloroquine in these patients. This is another study that has been published, 514 rheumatoid arthritis patients, again users versus non-users, and we see that hydroxychloroquine 400 milligrams a day had a significant protective effect on myocardial infarctions, strokes, TIAs, and venous thrombosis. This is something which is very interesting. And again, the primary use of hydroxychloroquine is not as an antiplatelet agent, but if we were to use it, you will see here that its actions on arachidonic acid, the adenosine diphosphate, and the collagens is clearly at least as much as the standard antiplatelet agents like aspirin and clopidogrel. And if you look at indices of platelet aggregation, it is at least as efficacious as aspirin and almost as efficacious as aspirin plus clopidogrel. So I am not saying that this replaces the antiplatelet agents, but when we are using this drug as a therapy in type 2 diabetes, we not only have some anti-hyperglycemic effect, we also probably by extrapolation from the studies on rheumatoid arthritis, some degree of protection against cardiovascular disease, and clearly it has some degree of potential as an antithrombotic agent. There are some ongoing clinical trials happening on hydroxychloroquine. One of the most important ones is the OXY trial, in which this is happening at the Helsinki hospital. 300 milligrams of hydroxychloroquine or placebo for patients who have had a recent myocardial infarction, and they will be studied for the next 1 year to see for composites of myocardial infarction, hospitalization for unstable angina, or a repeat percutaneous intervention. The data collection has been done. We still do not have the reports. There are also studies ongoing in CKD, again hydroxychloroquine versus placebo, and the endpoint that is being studied in CKD is to look at total carotid plaque volume, which, as you know, is a surrogate marker for atherosclerosis. As far as the safety of hydroxychloroquine goes, by and large, the use of this hydroxyl molecule in, or an addition of the hydroxyl molecule in the chloroquine group makes it pretty safe for long-term use, because chloroquine as a molecule cannot be used long-term, particularly in terms of retinal safety. But addition of this hydroxyl group limits its ability to cross the blood-retinal barrier, and therefore there is a faster clearance from the retinal pigment cells. Overall, if you see, there is a very low statistical risk of retinal toxicity with the hydroxychloroquine molecule, and particularly if you are using the advisable doses, less than 5 milligrams per kilogram, there is hardly any risk, less than 1% risk for the first 5 years, less than 2% for the first 10 years. And therefore, if you are using hydroxychloroquine, it's mandatory that you start with a fundus examination when you decide about hydroxychloroquine. You add visual fields and a OCT if there is some suspicion of maculopathy. And then, of course, you do an annual screening. You need not even do it every year because the risk is minimal for the first 5 years. But at the end of 5 years of use, you must screen for the retinopathy again. And clearly, if there is retinopathy of any kind, hydroxychloroquine is contraindicated. It's also not particularly indicated in children. It's not indicated in pregnancy and lactation. And it's not particularly advisable in patients who have low renal function, and again in hepatic disease. So by and large, it would be a drug to use as a good third line agent for patients with diabetes who do not have significant liver or kidney disease and do not have retinopathy. As far as when you add this drug, be careful that the dose of other drugs like insulin or other anti-diabetic drugs could significantly come down by up to 30%. So you need to be careful. Another important thing is to look at drugs which change the prolong the QT interval or change the QT interval. So other antiarrhythmogenic drugs, we should be very careful because this has the potential to cause some degree of change in the QTs. And since I showed you from the HEAT studies that it has some antiplatelet, antithrombotic activity, when you combine it with other antiplatelet agents, one needs to be careful to see whether there is any increased risk of bleeding. So the take-home message from this would be that hydroxychloroquine is a useful and a novel, the drug is not novel, but the mechanism and the effect seems to be novel. There is at least a 0.9 to 1.3% reduction in HbA1c when used over all the combined drugs that we have right now. Additional benefits on lipids and marginal weight reduction do not have adequate evidence from cardiovascular outcome trials, but some trials are going on. Some retrospective evidence can be used, and if you use it judiciously when there is no retinopathy, can be a useful addition to the current treatment armamentarium. And it's a cheap drug to use, and from personal experience, I can say we've used it now in several hundreds of patients. And sometimes, the effects are miraculous. Sometimes it doesn't work. You can stop those drugs in that time, but sometimes the effect is pretty miraculous. Thank you very much.